What's the closest to death experience you've ever had? Myself and a couple friends decided drunkenly to paddle boat across the lake we were staying at, in the middle of the night, in Maine, Canada. The boat had a hole in it and sank halfway across. Lake water in May is like ice water. It sucks the air out of you and you are kinda in shock instantly. I'm a decent swimmer but I was sure that was it. We stripped naked and started swimming. I just made it to shore. My other buddy was okay but my one went under like 10 feet from shore. My one friend was just tall enough to touch the bottom and lift him out and carry him to shore. We were all purple and obviously had hypothermia. I can't stress how important life jackets are. 5 more feet my best friend would be dead. 20 more I'd be dead. Other buddy maybe 50. Life jackets. Every time you're on the water no matter what. Oh yeah, I live in Massachusetts on a pond. A lot of people are seasonal residents so we'd sled down their driveways in the winter and if you shot out on the ice normally it'd be thick enough to support a 12-year-old. One year it wasn't and man in full snow gear I sunk. But I got out. We used to start swimming in March to see who could do it earlier but that January water is no joke. When my appendix ruptured, I went to the emergency room in the most intense pain imaginable. I was taken to surgery almost immediately after I was scanned. I spent 3 days in the hospital recovering. I had appendicitis, but didn't know it. So I went to the hospital in the middle of the night but they didn't have the right ultrasound so they sent me home for the night. Went to a different hospital in the morning. Thankfully it hadn't ruptured. I nearly fell over 200 feet inside a tall cathedral bell tower when trying to help the sexton reattach a rope that had come loose from one of the large bells at the top of the structure. The old wooden ladder, about 135 years old, gave way. Fortunately, I was able to land on a large borden bell and sit on it until the sexton could arrange for help. Arosha. When I was 5 my granddad gave me a hard candy, and it slid down the back of my throat. I freaked the frick out and reached my hand down my throat, grabbed the fricking thing, and threw it on the ground. My family got angry at me because they didn't realize I had been choking. I was in Seoul. I stepped out of a bus when a glass bottle of soju was dropped from a 20-story tower. It fell directly above my head but I made a sudden move and felt it graze my cheek before smashing between my feet. I'm certain had it hit my head I'd have been killed instantly. If dropped from near the top it would have accelerated to around 120-140 km per hour so yes, you would be very likely to die. Not me but my mother decided to empty a hydrogen peroxide bottle into an empty water bottle because she's kind of crazy about seeing too many bottles. She put it by her bedside table and then proceeded to accidentally drink the whole thing in one gulp. The minute her stomach started blowing up she knew what happened. She comes running to me and tells me she just poisoned herself and is feeling her stomach inflate. I am celiac so I can't eat gluten so I just so happen to have carbon pills that I use when I am glutened. These can also help with poisoning. She drank like 15 pills and just starts blowing up. Ended up throwing up black goo all over herself and me but I was crying happy tears in the car while she threw up because this was where I realized she would live. At the hospital, we were rushed right through because she came in a wheelchair covered in black goo. The doctors kept coming and talking to her about why she poisoned herself and why she had a cure right at home. She is fine now but it was really crazy. Never put any liquid that is not meant to be consumed into a drink bottle. Even if you might know what's in it, other people don't and mistakes like the one you stated happen too often because of that. If anyone ever saw that one news story where the ninja ride at Six Flags Magic Mountain derailed in July 2014, was there on my birthday. I was in line to go on that ride. Technically, nobody died on it or anything, but it's probably the closest I've even had to a near-death experience. A true near-death experience. Went climbing in a seaside cliff. Stopped for lunch in an alcove. At lunch and got up to climb down. As I turned around, a chunk of rock fell from the ceiling of the alcove and landed exactly where I was sat. If I'd stayed a few seconds longer, I would have been crushed. Was on a hot air balloon for the first time while vacationing in Arizona with my fiance. It was a large basket with maybe 8 of us in it. I was already super nervous and I was just watching the altimeter rise up and up as we got higher in the air. We had taken off with multiple other balloons and one young kid in particular was making his first solo flight apparently. While on the radio the pilots are constantly communicating each other's locations and they kept asking where that kid was and nobody could pinpoint where he was. I look at the altimeter that just passed 5,300 feet, over a mile high, and I just start looking around for the kid and his balloon. Just as I look down, I see a balloon coming up fast directly below our basket. I freak out and start screaming holy crap right below us, and just then the top of that balloon nails our basket from below and jostles the whole basket nearly sideways, and his balloon scrapes against our basket and our balloon as it rises upward, and that little punk just f-king laughs it off as he floats away. I thought I was going to plummet a mile to my death with my fiancée in my arms in that moment. I will never get in one of those flaming death traps again. Some people deserve to get their butt kicked. That guy definitely does. When I was 15, I went to the ER for prolonged dizziness and sleepiness. They kind of ignored me because it just seemed like a kid wanting out from school. Then they actually triaged me and I had a blood pressure of 48/22. That's in line with a 3-month-old baby. I fainted right after they took that. My heart rate also never got above mid-40s. I was in my own private room, of higher emergency level than the motorcycle accident guy, with a crash cart in my room and the hospital trying to arrange a helicopter transport to a bigger trauma center. I was given 5 liters of fluids over just a few hours without any change. My head had to be kept below my heart to make sure I was getting enough blood to my brain. I wasn't otherwise, which is why I was dizzy and sleepy. They never figured out what was wrong. They found I have a prolonged QT interval, but it comes and goes, which is apparently even more abnormal. I know when it happens because my chest hurts and I get dizzy. If I don't lay down I will faint. It can take anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes to pass, but it always does. I was prescribed more salt and water, and that was that. I didn't even realize how close I was to death until like a year later when another doctor straight out told me there is no clear reason why I didn't die that day. I've got the same symptoms except my mom didn't take me to the doctor, she just told me to let down. Woke up 5 hours later. During my birth, my umbilical cord almost strangled me to death twice. Ironic that the thing that was keeping me alive was trying to kill me. The same. I didn't start to cry so the doctors had to slap my butt repeatedly until I took the first breath. Was working at a scout camp when I was 14 or 15 or something. Worked at shooting sports as an assistant to the older dude 60, we'll call him Greg, who was teaching the course. There was a guy who was probably 24, call him Jack, working the shotguns while me and Greg would do rifles. Well, Jack freaking hated me. I never did anything, but I am a very hateable person in his eyes, I suppose. Greg had his concealed carry gun stolen from his truck. They were investigating what to do when Jack told me that he was going to kill me. I was scared shitless and of course I called my dad, who called the camp leader. They found the stolen gun in Jack's trunk. God, I have no idea what would have happened if I hadn't said something. I was on holiday 5 years ago. We rented a speedboat and went swimming in the lake. I stupidly decided not to wear a life jacket and I'm not a strong swimmer. Went to swim back to the boat and the water had swept it quite a bit away. Became too exhausted to keep myself above the water. I started having a panic attack and was sure I was going to die. I just went limp and under. My boyfriend's sister's boyfriend had to swim to me and hold me up until my boyfriend got back to the boat to throw a ring out for me. Sometimes I choke on my spit. It's not close to death, but if I am dumb enough to do that, every meal is an extreme experience. I knew a 29-year-old girl. She worked in the laundromat that choked to death on a marshmallow. I will never eat marshmallows again. One time my mum told me to get the chicken out the freezer and kept reminding me and I was like, yes I will. Anyway, she pulled up 5 hours later and the chicken was still in the freezer. The old do the thing before I get home and meaning to do it but also having Netflix, Reddit, and video games. I actually died. When I was 21 I had way too much to drink one night at the bar I was working at. Stayed there drinking after hours with co-workers, who were all in their mid-late 30s and could drink a heck of a lot more than I could. Around 4 in the morning everyone was ready to call it a night but I refused to leave the bar and became belligerent. Was blacked out, this is what I was told. Finally they called me a cab and had to physically put me in the cab. Not really sure what happened in the cab ride, but basically I ended up getting thrown out of the cab while it was moving. Less than 10 mph. And I'm assuming I hit my head when I fell out of the cab and passed out in the road. While I was unconscious I vomited and choked on my vomit and stopped breathing. By some miraculous stroke of luck, moments after that happened, somebody who lived on that street decided to walk their dog at 5 in the morning and found me and called an ambulance. I woke up at noon the next day drunk as heck in a hospital bed on a ventilator. Some guy at the hospital, can't remember if he was a doctor or an assistant or what, read me the report from the first responders that said when they got to me I was unresponsive and had to be revived. Whoa, my friend also died after being buried upside down in sand. Took them 5 minutes to get him out and a few more to revive him. His lungs were full of sand and his hip was stuffed up from trying to be pulled out by it. Work on an ambulance. Had a call at like 2 AM for an elderly woman with low blood sugar. We get out there and are in the process of treating her when a black SUV pulls up. Tatted up Indian guy gets out and power walks up to us and asks what's going on. He then looks at me and says I look a lot like a cop and asks if we're cops. Guess the ambulance wasn't obvious enough. Well, some nervous laughter and a no, definitely not cops. His attitude seems to change and we leave a little bit later. Well, turns out he was in the IBH, Indian Brotherhood, and the next weekend he ended up getting in a shootout with cops while using an AR and wearing a bulletproof vest, and he was looking to kill some cops. Guess I'm glad he asked us first. Indian as in Native American or as in guy from India. When I stuck a knife in a toaster in an attempt to get toast out of it, the power to the house got cut when the switch tripped because of it and I thought I was going to get electrocuted. One of my only cooking tricks is to hold the knife over the toaster so it warms up the blade and makes it easier to go through the butter when it's ready. I never share this tip though because I don't want someone to drop the knife into the toaster and blame me for the dumb idea. Had severe brain swelling for no known reason. Had a coma induced to take some of the strain away when I was about 7. Apparently they didn't think I was going to wake up. I don't remember much of my life before that. Ouch, that's rough. My friend had brain surgery for a blood clot when she was 11 and doesn't have any childhood memories either. One day I was walking down the sidewalk to go grab a bite. A bit down the way all I hear is this squealing noise and a car swerves off the road and almost hits me. Didn't get super close, but close enough to be within 4 feet in front of me. The car crashed into a mailbox and then a light pole. I literally could not for 5 seconds out of fear, but it felt like an eternity. I hurried up and called the emergency services and ran over to see if they were fine. The driver was fine and she said that she didn't wanna hit a pothole and mess up her newly purchased car. After the emergency service people came and asked questions, I went back to the store. Kinda was out of it, but I still walked to the store super cautiously now. While coming home I dropped my drink I bought. Interesting day for sure. When I was maybe 12, I was at the beach with a really large group and we were all out a bit further in the ocean than I was really comfortable with. Couldn't quite touch the sand anymore. There had been some inclement weather the day before and the waves were a bit rough. At one point a large wave came crashing down on top of me and sucked me under. After being flipped around a bit, I tried to surface but was so turned around that I ended up slamming my head into the seafloor. Started frantically trying to find my way back up to the surface, and as soon as I finally found my way up and started to gasp for a breath of air, another wave came down and pulled me under again. At one point I remember thinking, well, guess this is how I die, and was oddly at peace with that. I stopped resisting and somehow surfaced again. When I finally had my bearings, I had been pulled really far away from the group. I slowly made my way back and tried to tell some of the others what had happened and that I needed to go lay down because I was freaking exhausted from almost dying. Sad part was that nobody had noticed the ordeal or seemed to believe me. I ended up walking a mile back to the hotel by myself because nobody else cared to leave. Sorry for bad English. I was driving my scooter and my friend was seated behind me. We were on a straight highway, so there is a slightly elevated bridge that we crossed and I was kinda going fast, 60 km/h. So as we were at the downslope of the bridge, suddenly a pothole came and after getting hit by it my rear tire suddenly got flat. I noticed it as my scooter first started itself turning to total left then right. Thank God to NFS Carbon and other drifting games movies that I learnt enough about counter steering by which I was able to keep both us from falling. My friend literally was screaming bro 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 bro. Hopefully no vehicle was coming behind us, although it's a really busy road. Imagine the other cars on that highway. Some scooter hits a pothole, starts freaking drifting. I shot an arrow at a target that was in front of a concrete wall. I missed and the arrow came back and hit me in the forehead, horizontally. Good God. My family once went on a trip to Britain, specifically Scotland mostly, and we were to stay in a place called Applecross. We thought it was a little weird that they were the only place that we stayed at that requested payment before we even got there. That should have been our first red flag. I'll spare you most of the details about getting to the road to Applecross, but we thought that the worst of it was over. The GPS said that there was only 10 kilometers to go, but it was going to take around 45 minutes. That should have been the second. We get to the Applecross Pass, and it's a one-way road with little spots on the side of the road for drivers to pull over when another car comes by. The road was suddenly at a 20% incline. We were covered in heavy fog, with only about 10 feet of visibility. There were 90-degree switchbacks that we had to maneuver around. There were barely any guardrails for a several thousand feet drop. We had to do this in a 9-seater van. Then we had to do it again to get out. Applecross was a nice place though. In 2nd grade I was on my way home on the school bus when a gas tanker truck ran a red light. The bus driver narrowly avoided it without impacting anyone. At the end nothing happened, but without the good reflexes of the driver we might have crashed with a tanker and probably exploded. Got a combination of flu and something else. Still don't know 100% what. That made me vomit SP much. I went to the emergency room. My sodium was dangerously low, near the stroke range, and for a while it wouldn't go up. Ended up in the hospital for a week, and had a point where an artery IV was caught and pulled out in my sleep. If I wasn't under constant watch, would have lasted about 15 minutes. Safe to say the Grim Reaper was just a couple blocks away. It was a few years ago, in the 8th grade. My teacher was basically in butthole and had no idea what she was doing, so she told us all to go into the closet when we had a lockdown drill. And lem tell ya, packing 18 kids into a small closet isn't a great idea. I was in last, since I was towards the other end of the room, but before I could make it in, someone slammed the door shut and half of my ring finger fell off. I started to feel really dizzy and started to feel a sharp pain in my finger. I looked down and realized what had happened. I saw my ring finger hanging onto my hand by a strand. I remember, kids in the classroom were screaming, running around. A lot started throwing up. One had a panic attack. I was rushed to the nurse and I felt really lightheaded and was rushed to the hospital. Worst day of my life, but I'm still here, thank God. Cause of death: lost his pinky finger to a door. May 2013 tornado and more. Okay. Passed terrifyingly close to my high school, and I thought I was for sure going to die that day. I even sent what I thought would be the last texts I'd ever send to my family telling them I love them. Community lost a lot that day. That tornado gives me nightmares. It was videotaped by so many people who narrowly avoided dying. All those storm chasers trying to outrun it, and you could hear the terrible suction it had trying to pull them into it. It was a monster. Glad you survived. So many. My dumb stuff I did as a teen favorite was swimming in a river in New Brunswick, over a waterfall, and hitting my head on the bottom, getting stuck in the hydraulic, basically a sideways whirlpool that holds you down, and passing out. Came to behind the waterfall in a little cave, which I then decided was really cool and explored for a few minutes, then swam out, to find my buddies freaking out and looking downstream for my body. They had very harsh words for me. If you were my friend I would be furious, haha. When I was in Mexico, me and my dad were swimming in the ocean. We are about 40 feet from shore. Some guy starts yelling at us from shore, so we decide to see what he wants. He tells us that there was a bull shark about 10 feet away from us, and then we realized that there was nobody in the water and everyone had their cameras out taking pictures. Gotta love humans. Basically waiting for the shark to go after you too so they can take pictures. I was swimming at a lake and used a pool noodle, only one noodle, to get to the other side. Wasn't the best idea. About halfway I lost balance and started freaking out. Didn't know how to swim at the time. Eventually, I got my balance back and swam back where I came from. Now I'm afraid of lakes. My physically abusive mother had been escalating her abuse after she discovered I was in a relationship with an older man. I was 15. I skipped school to see him and she found out. She had me pinned to the wall by my throat and said, "I'll kill you," calm as could be. She told my siblings to watch me. She had to take my older sister to work. I went to the bathroom and called a classmate. I told her to wait a couple hours then call the cops. I had tried to report my mother before. Broken ribs, cigarette burns, but she was a good liar. I needed proof. I was going to fight back. That would infuriate her. She came home and I don't remember what happened after that. My next memory is being pressed onto her bed. She's laying on me, crushing me. My mom is huge. She was choking me saying, "What's wrong with you?" over and over. She only stopped because her best friend came in the front door. I passed out. When I woke up my teacher was calling me over and over. There was a cop outside for me. I jumped my back fence after sneaking out. I never stepped foot in that house again and left the state a week later. Hope you're okay now. I was 6 and was pretending that this refrigerator in the basement was a rocket. This was in the early 70s, and it was an unused old style fridge that had a latch on the door. I locked myself in it, and over time, felt it getting warmer and more humid. A friend of my older brother, about 17 years old, found me about 10-15 minutes later. Later in life, I knew them to be big stoners at the time. I wonder now if he didn't have the munchies, would I be alive right now? I can only imagine being stoned like heck, opening a fridge and finding my buddy's little brother inside. I took 60 pills, 40 Benadryl, 20 or SMTH else that I forgot what it was called, in 8th grade, passed out, started having seizures. My mom took me to the hospital where the doctor thought I was gonna die. BC my vitals were everywhere, so he told my mom that I'm probably not gonna make it and she called in a priest to give me my last rites. LOL, I survived obviously, but I lost 7 lbs in the span of a day, couldn't walk for days, and to this day I have constant nausea and puke very often. Hit a cattle grate on a longboard going at least 35 miles per hour. Was unfathomably lucky to walk away with only a hyperextended elbow and a concussion scar above my eyebrow, and that my sunglass lenses didn't shatter on impact and get in my eyes. Wear a freaking helmet. The driver of one of those biggest 18-wheelers had earbuds in and started to merge lanes while we were next to him. If my window was rolled down, I could have touched the side of his car with my nose. Sorry for format, I'm on mobile and don't use Reddit much. Context: I use my grandparents' house to get dropped off and picked up from school since I like the district they're in. A couple of years ago the government turned the 2-lane road into a 4-lane with a large divider, which made it a mini highway but with houses. When I was younger I was getting off the bus after my last day of primary school when a small flatbed truck, the ones that carry a car after a crash, decided to continue driving on the same lane of the stopped bus while also speeding. He swerved at the last second and his back tire hit the concrete sidewalk, which somehow sent a large chunk flying past my head into my dad's Toyota Celica. He then drove off full speed, but some guy in his car had a dashcam and caught it all and stopped by later that day to give us the evidence of the guy speeding as well as his plate number so we could report him and charge for damages. Around 8 years old at Valley Fair with my family, was a really skinny kid. Stick figure, chicken legs, you get it. That will matter later on. I was just barely tall enough to ride the Wild Thing. Back then the Wild Thing's seatbelt was a lap rope belt similar to one in a car, and a metal lap bar. My mom and I got into a car together, and I noticed my legs weren't long enough to reach the bottom of the car to brace myself on the drops. When we started going down the very first massive drop, I started to slouch as I wasn't tall enough. And I found out pretty quick that my skinny butt legs weren't strong enough to hold my weight either, so I started to slide down under the seat belt. I was telling my mom the entire time, "I'm going to fall out, I'm sliding out, I'm going to fall out." She thought I was joking. She wasn't paying attention, which I don't blame her for, it's a scary ride LOL. And she was laughing at me until she looked over and saw that my chin was the only thing holding myself in the car at this point. She pulled me up back in my seat and held on to me for the rest of the ride. It's pretty crazy. It seems like that happened in slow motion as I replay it in my head, but it was really only about 10-15 seconds. My mom hasn't been on a ride since, and I, 24F, haven't been on the wild thing since. I have a couple other stories, but this one still freaks me up lol. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.